I believe what we need to do is we need to address it on the front end of every season, with every child, with every parent. Here's what we're seeing in our community. Here's what we're seeing in our schools. Here's what we're doing about it. Here are our rules concerning it. Coaches need to set up policy for alcohol and drug use. It's almost like a virus. It just spreads rapidly. And if you don't have protocols in place to, one, identify them, two, confront them, and then three, treat them, you're not ever going to gain any control in the athletic world. When people are trying to push through injuries, they will turn to anything they think will help, not necessarily even knowing whether it will. We don't want to let our teammates down. We don't want to let our school colors down. We don't want to let our coaches down.
If they want to use the medicine to be able to play through their injury and not wait for things to heal like they should, with more conservative measures. So that's another area of abuse that could lead to problems down the line.
Some wrestlers, or in my particular sport, some students will not report injuries because they're scared they might lose a starting position of some sorts, or be considered weak, or some of those type of things.
Coaches need to know that their athletes are going to get injured, and they're going to go to the doctor, and they're probably going to be prescribed painkillers. I mean, when Cameron went to the doctor, the second time he broke his collarbone, I took him to the urgent care, and that's the first thing they did was give him a prescription for painkillers. I mean, the goal of the physician was to reduce the pain immediately.
Pain does guide you when you have an injury because it tells you the location, it tells you the severity, you're going to be able to feel it.
In sports injuries, you'd want to know if that injury is worse. And if you're masking that pain with opioids, there's really no way to know.
As it mends, the pain will decrease. And so it's going to tell me that it is healing. Let's say you give the child strong medications for the broken bone. She won't know if it's healing or not because she doesn't feel the pain. And so pain is a lifesaver, and a little pain won't hurt you. I think sometimes we want our society to be pain-free.
If they're injured, if they're not able to play, having those conversations with them to figure out, what are you taking, and are there things that physical therapy can help with, or things to, maybe just ice and resting it. Maybe they don't need to take the opiates.
There's, different degrees of injury, obviously, but most injuries, I think, can be treated conservatively. And you may have heard the expression RICE, which is when you have a sprain or a contusion or something like that. The treatment is rest, ice, compression, and elevation. And then if you need a medication, usually a non-opiate over-the-counter medication like ibuprofen or Motrin or Tylenol can treat the vast majority of minor injuries that athletes will sustain.
Usually I'd swim. Some girls did yoga. They went to chiropractors, which I did too, but in the end I just needed rest, honestly.
Kinesio tape is great. Physical therapists can do that. So a physical therapist seeing somebody like that, a chiropractor, cold therapy, hot tub swimming. There's just more out there than going to a regular doctor and getting pills.
I believe the signs you need to look for are changes in personalities, changes in habits, changes in grades, frustration in the home front. Sometimes as coaches, we're the first to find out about that because the athlete won't confide in anybody else for that, where they have a relationship and loyalty to the coach. So, we play a very, very, very large role in this, and we can be a solution in some respects, not all, but in some respects we can be a solution to this.
I think if athletes or coaches know their athlete, and so they know, I think the coaches that coached Cameron, they definitely could see changes in him. They saw changes in his performance, they saw changes in his ability to show up for practice, they saw changes in his focus and just how dedicated he was to his sport. And so recognizing those things early on and just kind of and saying, something's not right, something's wrong.
The difficulty, not only for parents but for coaches as well, you see these changes and there was always a parallel excuse for it. And there always seemed to be a parallel excuse. You want to believe that what they're telling you is the truth, but I've learned through addiction that you have to question everything.
I would definitely encourage them to talk to parents. I mean, parents are hard to, I'm a parent, and we're hard to talk to, especially when it's regarding our kids. But if the coaches are recognizing that there's a behavior change, I think it's really important for them to let the parents know. Because the parents may be seeing it, but they may not be wanting to go there with it.
I have seen athletes deal with painkillers and struggle with painkillers and addictions and so forth. At the time, as a coach, I could see it in the athletes. I recognized definite changes in that particular athlete or those particular athletes, but I didn't see it in my own son. We are blessed that he is clean right now and he is sober right now, but we truly do live one day at a time. And we know that at any time that could be different. He was just short, I believe, of 16 when he first started. He's 24 and a half. So he's been fighting this battle now for 8 years.
As a kid, you're looking up to your coach, so he can teach you more than just the sport. Because a lot of great coaches, it starts outside of the gym. So, I mean, if a coach is a great coach, he'll sit there and talk to his kids about this. He'll show them how if it does happen, come to me. Even if before it happens, come to me, and we'll sit here and talk about it before you get to that point. So definitely, a coach can be a big change in a kid's life.
He was 19. The kid who was going to go off to play college ball, and ultimately, in his mind, he knew he was going to do great things, didn't survive his addiction.
16. He was 16 when he started. He was 18, almost 19, when he passed away. So he was about 2 months shy of his 19th birthday.
He had taken a synthetic opiate that looked identical to OxyContin. And he died. He stopped breathing March 11th of this year. He had just turned 21.
This is bigger than just a game. This is just your life. That's all it is. It's just your life. And if we don't start taking measures in every aspect of our community, not just the athletes, but every measure, then we've got a much greater problem than we're facing now, and it's pretty big now. Please.
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 Think about this.
Think about this
Talk about this.
With your athletes.
with your athletes.
With your athletes.